Good afternoon, Husky Pups. I am here to read chapters 11 and 12 of the BFG with you. I got my dream jar here. Always have it out when we're reading, and always have out your BFG packet. So before I read chapter 11, I'm going to go over the questions. Journey to Dream Country. What are the names of the other giants in this chapter? So keep an eye out for these very strange long names. What did the other giants do to the BFG? How do the gizzard-gulping giant and the meat-dripping giant catch human beings? Describe Dream Country. So here are your 4 questions for chapter 11. Journey to Dream Country. After the mad frobscottle party was over, Sophie settled herself again on top of the enormous table. You is feeling better now? Asked the big friendly giant. Much better, thank you, Sophie said. Whenever I is feeling a bit bad, the BFG said, a few gallops of frobscottle is always making me happy again. I must say it's quite an experience, Sophie said. It's glorious. He turned away and strode across the cave and picked up his dream-catching net. I is galloping off now, he said, to catch some more dreams for my collection. I is doing this every day without missing. Do you wish to come with me? Not me, thank you very much, said Sophie, not with those other giants lurking outside. I is snuggling you very cozy in my pocket. Then no one will see you. Before Sophie could profess, he picked her up off the table and popped her right in his pocket. There was plenty of room in there. Is you wishing for a little hole to peep out? He asked her. There's one here already, she said. She had found a small hole. She watched the BFG as he bent down and filled his suitcase with empty glass jars, because that's where he puts the dreams. He closed the lid, picked up the suitcase in one hand, and took the pole with a net in the other hand, and they marched out of the cave. As soon as he was outside, the BFG set off across the great hot yellow wasteland where the blue rocks lay and the dead trees stood and where all the other giants were lurking about. Sophie, squatting low on her heels in the pocket, had one eye glued to the little hole, so she's peeking out because she wants to see. She saw the group of enormous giants about 300 yards ahead. Hold your breaths, the BFG whispered. Cross your fingers, here we go. We is going right past all these other giants. Is you seeing that whooping great one, the one nearest? I see him, Sophie whispered back, quivering a little bit. He is the horrible of them all, the biggest of them all. He is called Flesh Lump Eating Giant. I don't want to hear about him, Sophie said. He is 54 feet high, said the BFG, and he is swallowing human beings like they is sugar lumps, 2 or 3 at a time. You was making very nervous, Sophie said. I is nervous myself, said the BFG. I always get as jumpy when he is around. Keep away from him. Not possible. He is galloping easily 2 times as quickly as me. Shall we turn back? Sophie said. Turning back is worse. If they see me running away, they is all giving chase and throwing rocks. They would never eat you, though, would they? Sophie asked. Oh, no. Giants never guzzle other giants. They is fighting and quarreling a lot with each other, but never guzzling. Human beings is more tasty to them. The giants had already spotted the BFG, and all heads were turned, watching him come forward. He was aiming to pass well in front of the group. Through her little hole, Sophie saw the flesh lump-eating giant. He just lopped over casually to let the BFG pass. The others lopped after him. Sophie counted 9 of them all together, and she recognized the blood bottler in the middle of them. They were bored. They had nothing to do until nightfall. There was an air of menace about them as they lopped around, heading for the BFG. So already they've given some names of these giants. Remember, that's one of our questions. Here comes the runt, boomed the flesh lump eater. Here comes the runt. Where is you going away in such a hurry? He shot out an enormous arm and grabbed the BFG. He simply stopped and stood quite still. The BFG didn't struggle. Be so kind as to let me out. Let go of my hair, Flesh Lump Eater. He released him and stepped back. The other giants stood around, waiting for the fun to start. Now then, we is all wanting to know where you is galloping off to every day in the daytime. Nobody ought to be galloping off anywhere until it is dark. The human beings could easily spot you and start a giant hunt, and we is not wanting that to happen. Is we? We is not, shouted the other giants. Go back to your cave, runt. I is not galloping to any human being country, BFG said. I is going to other places. I is thinking, said the Flesh Lump Eater, that you is catching human beings and keeping them as pets. Right you is, cried Blood Bottler. Just now I'm hearing them chittering away in one of those caves. Yours is welcome to go and search my cave, answered the BFG. You can go look in every nook and cranny. There is no human being there. Sophie crouched as still as a mouse, in the pocket, barely able to breathe. She was terrified she might sneeze. The slightest sound or movement would give her away. Through the tiny peephole, she watched the giants clustering around the poor BFG. How revolting they were. All of them had piggy little eyes and enormous mouths. When the Flesh Lump Eater was speaking, she got a glimpse of his tongue. It was jet black. Suddenly, the Flesh Lump Eater shot out 2 enormous hands and grabbed the BFG around the waist. Catch him, man hugger. Man hugger, another giant, caught him. The other giants spread out quickly in a large circle, each giant about 20 yards from the other. Now the man hugger threw the BFG high and far, shouting, Catch him, Bone Cruncher. The Bone Cruncher ran toward and caught the tumbling BFG. Threw him again. Catch him, Child Chewer. And so it went. The giants were playing ball with the BFG, with each other, throwing him the highest they could. Sophie dug her nails into the sides of the pocket, trying to prevent herself from tumbling out whenever she was upside down. She felt as though she were in a barrel going over Niagara Falls. And all this time there was the fearful danger that one of the giants would fail to catch him and he would go crashing to the ground. So they're just throwing the poor BFG all around. In the end, they got bored with this game. They dumped the poor BFG on the ground. He was dazed and shattered. They gave him a few quick kicks and shouted, Runt, you little runt. The BFG ran. What else could he do? The giants picked up rocks and hurled them after him. At last, the BFG got clear of them all. In another couple of minutes, the pack of giants was out of sight. Sophie popped her head up. I didn't like that, she said. Whew, said the BFG. Few and far between. They were a nasty mood today, was they not? I is sorry you were having to see that. No worse than you, Sophie said. Would they ever really hurt you? I is never trusting them, the BFG. How do they actually catch humans they eat? Sophie asked. And this, Husky Pup, says another question. They is usually just kicking an arm in through the bedroom window and snitching them up from their beds. Like you did to me? Yes, but remember, I wasn't going to eat you. How else do they catch them? Sometimes they go into the water and they come to the beach and their hand, big hairy hand, grabs them right off the beach. Children, often children, little children who is building sandcastles on the beach. As they talked, the BFG was galloping fast over the land. Sophie was standing right up to the pocket and holding the edge with both hands. Her head and shoulders were in the open and the wind was blowing in her hair. How else do they catch people? All of them have their own special way of catching human beings. The meat gripping giant, which is one of your questioning, is preferred to pretend he is a big tree growing in the park. He is standing in the park in the dusky evening and is holding great big branches over his head. And there he is waiting until some happy families is coming to have a picnic under the tree. The meat dripping giant watching them, but in the end, he is the one really having the picnic. Oh, that's awful, Sophie cried. And the gizzard gulping giant is a city lover. He hides between the roofs of houses in big cities, and he is lying there snuggy and sniggler watching the humans beings on the streets. And when he looks, he grabs them. He is simply reaching down and snitching them right off the street, like a monkey taking a nut. He says it is nice to be able to pick and choose what you have for supper. He says it's like choosing from a menu. Don't people see him doing this? Never is they seeing him. Do not forget it is at dark. Also, the gizzard gulper has a very fast arm. But if all these people are disappearing every night, surely there should be some sort of outcry. The world is a big place, the BFG. The giants are very clever. And do not forget the BFG that human beings disappear everywhere all the time, even without giants guzzling them up. Human beings, they kill each other quicker than the giants do it. But they don't eat each other, Sophie said. Well, giants, we don't eat each other either. Giants is not very lovely, but they do not kill each other. They kill mice? Yes, but they do not kill their own kind. Human beings is the only animals that do kill their own kind. Don't poisonous snakes kill each other? She was searching desperately for another creature that might behave as badly as the humans. Even poisonous snakes never kill each other, nor the most fearsome creatures. You human beings are the horrors before giants because you're eating each other. Right on left, right. But human beings is squishing each other. So the giants, they don't eat each other, but the humans, they do attack each other. They is shooting guns and going up in the aeroplanes to drop their bombs on each other's heads. Human beings is always killing each other, human beings. And he was right. Sophie knew it. She was beginning to wonder whether humans were actually any better than giants. Even so, I think it's rotten that those foul giants go off every night to eat humans. But you don't like it that those beastly giants are eating humans every night, do you, Sophie asked. So she tries to change the subject because she knows that it's not good. I do not, the BFG answered. One right is not making two lefts. I too was quite cozy down there in my pocket. Are you quite cozy? I'm fine, Sophie said. Then suddenly, once again, the BFG went into the magical top gear. He kept hurtling forward in leaps. The landscape became blurred again, and Sophie had to duck down to save her head from being blown off of her shoulders. She crouched in the pocket and listened to the wind screaming past. It came knifing in through the tiny peephole in the pocket. But this time, the BFG didn't stay in a top gear long. It seems as though he had some barrier to cross, a vast mountain, or an ocean, or a desert. But having crossed it once again, slowed down to his normal gallop. Sophie was able to pop her head up and look out once more at the view. She noticed immediately that they were now altogether paler country. The sun had disappeared, the air was becoming cooler, the land was flat and treeless, and there was no color in this land at all. Every minute the mist became thicker, so they're describing dream country. The air became colder and still everything became paler and paler. Nothing but gray and white all around them. There was some sort of grass underneath, but it was not green. It was gray. There was no sign of a living creature and no sound at all except for the soft thud of the BFG's footsteps. Suddenly he stopped. We're here, he says. He bent down and lifted Sophie from his pocket and put her on the ground. She was still in her nightgown and her feet were bare. She shivered. Where are we? She asked. We is in dream country, the BFG said. This is where all dreams begin. So now you're going to take a moment, and if you need to pause the video, go ahead and pause it and go ahead and answer your questions. As we move on to chapter 12, you actually don't have any questions. You're actually going to decorate a dream jar that is already in your packet. So we got these started on Friday. We're also going to draw one here, and then you're going to write down your dream. So think about that as I read the next chapter. All right, we are going to drop my book. Dream catching. The big friendly giant put the suitcase on the ground. He bent down low so that his enormous face was close to Sophie's. From now on, we is keeping as still as little mice, he whispered. The BFG opened the suitcase and took out several empty jars. He then set them on the ground with their screws topped off. Then he stood up very straight. His head was now high in the mist, and it kept disappearing and then appearing again. Sophie staring upwards through the mist. They began waving gently to and fro. Suddenly, the BFG pounced. He leaped high in the air and swung the net through the mist. Got him, he cried. A jar, quick. Sophie picked up a jar and held it to him. He grabbed a hold of it. He lowered the net. Very carefully, he tipped something absolutely invisible from the net into the jar. He dropped the net and swiftly clapped one hand over the jar. The top, the jar top. Sophie picked up the screw top and handed it to him. He screwed it right on top. The BFG was excited. He held the jar close to the one ear, and he's listening intently. It's a golden fizz wizard. Sophie stared. Oh my, he said, holding the jar. This will be giving some little toddler a very happy night when I is blowing in it. It's a really good one. A good one, he cried. It's golden. It's not often I is getting one of these. He handed the jar to Sophie. Please be still as a starfish now. I is thinking that there might be a whole swarm of wizards up here today. Once again, he stood up tall in the mist, holding his net on ready. Then came the long silence, the waiting. Then listening, with surprising suddenness, he leaped again and took a swish of his net. Another jar, he cried, quick. When the second dream was safely in the jar and the top was screwed down, the BFG held it in his ear. Oh no, he cried. What's the matter? Sophie said. His voice was filled with fury. What are you talking about? Sophie said. The BFG was getting distressed every moment. Oh, bash my bones. I come all this way to get a lovely golden dream, and this is what I'm catching. Well, what is it? I is catching a frightsome troggle humper. This is a bad dream. So in dream country, there's some good dreams, but then there's also some bad dreams. It is a bad dream, worse than a bad dream. It's a nightmare. Oh no, Sophie said, what will you do with it? Why is never letting it go, the BFG cried. If I do, then some poor little toddler will be having the most horrible dream. I is exploding it as soon as I'm getting it home. Nightmares are horrible, Sophie said. I had one once and I woke up sweating all over. With this one, you would be waking up screaming. This one would make your teeth stand on end. If this one got into you, your blood would be freezing to icicles and your skin would be creeping across the floor. Is it bad as that? It's worse. It's terrible. Sophie, who was staring into the glass jar, cried out, I can see it. There's something in there. So in the jar, just like in my jar, there's something in there moving. Of course it is, the BFG. You was looking at frightsome troggle humper, but you told me that dreams were invisible. They is always invisible until they are captured, the BFG said. After that, they is losing a little of their invisibility. We is seeing this one very clearly. Inside the jar, Sophie could see the faint scarlet outline of something that looked like a mixture of blob and gas and a bubble of jelly. So that's kind of why I used slime, and it kind of resembles that, a blob. It was moving violently, thrashing against the sides of the jar and forever changing shape. It's wiggling all over the place, Sophie said. It's fighting to get out. It'll bash itself to bits. The nastier the dream, the angrier it gets. Just look at him splashing himself against the glass. It's quite frightening, Sophie said. I would be hating to get this one inside me on a darksome night. So would I, Sophie said. The BFG started putting the bottles back into the suitcase. Is that all? Sophie said. Are we going? I is so upset by this troggle humping nightmare. I is not wishing to go on. Dream catching is finished for today. Soon Sophie was back to the waistcoat pocket and the BFG was racing home as fast as he could go. When at last they merged out of the mist and came again onto the hot yellow wasteland, all the other giants were sprawled out on the ground, fast asleep. So design your dream jar and make sure you take a picture of these and post them on Class Dojo. So what is going to be in your dream jar? Miss Bottone has lots of big dreams. What are yours, Husky Pups? Let's read some more later this week.